So once again, thank you so much for joining us today for this online session with Pamila Fonseka. Before we start, please let me introduce myself. My name is Marlene Hernandez, and I'm the office manager here at Research YYC. We are a co-working space for professionals. So if you're looking for a private office to work for the day or on a monthly basis, just let me tell you that this is the right place for you. We also provide virtual office services in case that you don't want to use your home address for your business. I will be sharing the link to our website in the chat so then you can find some more information about us. But before we start, please be aware that this session will be recorded for you and for all our members to watch later on our website. Well, with that being said, it is time to start with the session. Pamela, thank you so much for joining us today, and it's all yours.
Wonderful. Thank you, Marlene. And I do apologize. I cannot seem to figure out why I am a little bit sideways, but maybe it goes because I'm kind of wonky anyway. So maybe this video setting is okay. Wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I know that your time is really important. My name is Pam. I really appreciate you being here. My Lunch and Learn session today is titled Future Proof Your Business Using ESG. And I hope that after this presentation, you will have an understanding of what ESG is about, that you'll see the value of ESG within your business. And here's a short agenda that I have. The first topic that I intend to cover is why should you even care about ESG? We will also cover some of the different terms that are out there in the marketplace. You know, you've probably heard of terms like corporate social responsibility. You've heard of terms like sustainability. So we'll cover a little bit of that during this presentation. I am not an accountant, but we will cover materiality and what is an emerging term right now, which is double materiality. And as we go through the presentation, you'll come to see why that is important. And I will also go through an overview of the different standards and frameworks that are out there in the marketplace. And we'll leave you with some free tools that perhaps should you choose to do an evaluation of materiality for your business, you've got some free tools to start that practice with. So that's our agenda. Let's get started. A little bit about me. My name is Pamela. I work with small to medium businesses to help them identify and take control of their ESG story. I am currently on a project with CSR strategies, and what we're doing is exactly that. We're helping a medium-sized business actually take control of their ESG story, and the reason that they are doing it is because their private investor has asked them to. So
hi Pam, apologies, this is Ada. Hi there. Your
Hi,
video
Ada.
is sideways, so you might want to turn your device.
Yes, thank you, Anna. When I turn the device, it just turns. It just turns with me. So there's
so maybe your auto rotate is on or something. Okay, that's fine. Don't let me interrupt you. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. I know it's kind of distracting, but like I said, I'm kind of wonky anyway, so maybe this is an appropriate setting. But yes, I do. There's a rotate setting within Zoom that I need to go into. But going back to our ESG, I think we've heard the term, and just asking the audience. Within Alberta, I think we're very familiar with that. The fact that E stands for environment, but if you wanted to just say what the S or the G stands for, it's social, and the G stands for governance. So these are the three pillars of ESG. And, if you wanted to type into the chat some of the issues under environment that you are familiar of under the E. So it would be things like emissions. I think that's an emerging topic. We hear a lot about emissions, water use, biodiversity. Under the social, there has been within Canada, the BIPOC community has also expressed what it wants to see employers do. So that also impacts a business. And under governance, we have issues like management philosophy, internal controls, leadership, that are all some of the issues under these 3 ESG pillars that impact the value of a business. So now that you have a sense of what ESG is and some of the issues that pertain within those 3 pillars, we're going to touch on why should you as a business owner even care. So here's a headline. The group of 7 countries, they have backed moves that would force banks and companies to disclose their exposure to climate-related risks. And this measure has been seen as vital to safeguard the financial system from climate change shocks. And perhaps right now here in Alberta, we're experiencing the climate change shocks in I don't know if you've gone to the grocery store, but there are less groceries in the grocery store due to the floods in BC. So just a practical example of what we're seeing in terms of how climate has impacted business. And these disclosures in the EU are becoming mandatory. Here are some headlines. There are a lot more loans here in Canada that are linked to businesses that have ESG disclosures. This is from 2021. Canada's top pension funds have issued a rare joint call for better ESG disclosures. And again, as you can see, that there are a lot of capital that is behind these calls and behind the request from institutional investors for better disclosure. This year, as you can see, the Ontario's Securities Commission has begun their policy work to inform regulatory consultation on ESG disclosures. So here's some of just the impending issues that are coming down the pipe. Number 1 is the growing investor demand. The United Nations Principles for Responsible Investment has signatories, and the number of signatories to the UN PRI have increased, and large institutional investors like BlackRock and Nomura are part of these signatories to the PRI principles. And there are 6 principles. I'm not going to go through all 6 of the principles within the United Nations PRI framework, but the first principle is that we will incorporate ESG issues into investment analysis and decision-making processes. So that's just another example of growing demands from institutional investors around more disclosure. We've seen too that there are changing regulations. We saw that with the Ontario Securities Exchange. We're seeing it in the EU. And most recently, the European Commission has, the European Commission, which is the executive branch of the European Union, released an action plan for financially sustainable growth. And it's seen as a sweeping, multifaceted policy directive intended to connect finance with sustainability. The next is there is growing demand within companies. I think I briefed, what we have also seen this year is Alphabet, and Alphabet is the parent company of Google. What the staff have demanded is that diversity and inclusion policies and programs within the business, that those diversity and inclusion policies be linked to their senior executive compensation. So just another example of what's going on in terms of the new demographic of millennials and Generation Z and what they're calling their employers to do. So some of that is sort of the stick, right? But when did this start and why has there been this call for more disclosures? We'll just go back a little bit. We're going to go back 20 years, in fact, when the Financial Accounting Standards Board, they released a paper and it was titled Improving Business Reporting, Insights into Enhancing Voluntary Disclosure. So this was 20 years ago. There was a lot of insights, but I'm just going to highlight 3 of the insights that they recognized. They recognized, firstly, the importance of voluntary disclosure, and they recognized that this was going to increase. Number 2 is accountants also recognized that there were intangibles that impacted a company's value. And we'll talk a little bit more about what we mean by the intangibles and how that impacts the company's value. They also said in some of the papers that voluntary disclosure should cover not only the good news stories, but also some of the disappointments. Okay, so I'm going to go back to that second point, which is intangibles impact company value. What does that mean? Financial accountants have traditionally relied on accounting statements to determine enterprise value. So things like the balance sheet, right? The income statement, cash flows, these statements traditionally have been used to identify enterprise value. And while this has been really important, accountants have also recognized that they alone do not show the full picture. These are important, but in a changing world where we're seeing macro trends like climate change, like resource constraints, these traditional accounting statements are not capturing what they're calling the intangibles that are impacting company value. So I'll give you an example. If you're thinking of an IT company, the human capital, which is the intellectual ability of your staff, right? That is a predictor of your future value. Yet traditional accounting statements don't currently have a good way of capturing that. So that's kind of an example of what I mean by intangible values. I'm going to go also to go and give you a little bit more of a context of what was going on 20, 25 years ago. So in 2001, American policymakers and corporate leaders found themselves facing the largest corporate accounting scandal in American history. And although they did recognize that there were already accounting sort of inappropriateness showing up in the system, nothing prepared them for what was seen in Enron and WorldCom. And here are a handful of some of the other accounting scandals and their auditors that were taking place some 25 years ago. And what happened? Well, the stock markets fell steadily and sharply. And by the end of July 2002, the S&P 500 had fallen nearly 30% in just 3 months. So we're familiar with it. I mean, I'm familiar with Enron, and I was familiar, and I remember that they were touted as exemplary in terms of their governance structure. They were seen as an exemplary company, and yet here we are. And so what that resulted in, all of that resulted in private investors calling for increased disclosures. Why? Because they recognized that the traditional financial statements didn't show the full picture. Okay, so we are here today. I'm going to now touch on this term materiality and double materiality. Again, I am not an accountant, but these terms do impact some of what is currently being seen in the marketplace in ESG. So the concept of materiality is what has guided companies on what to disclose. And it has been the bedrock for disclosure. However, the definition of materiality and the application is not been static. And what we've seen is in 2019, the EU Commission first introduced the term double materiality. And that term double materiality, in short, is meant to capture some of those environmental concerns, some of the social concerns, and how a business impacts the environment and the society that it operates in. Might be of interest to you, but this year the EU Commission has also mandated over 50,000 companies in Europe to conduct a double materiality assessment. So back to environmental, social, and governance issues, and why are they important? Well, you know, as we saw, issues like good governance, which was something Enron did not have, although they said they did, and perhaps good leadership and good leadership management philosophy are hard to capture, and yet they do impact the future value of an enterprise. So back to ESG and why we're seeing over time this rise in its importance. I'd mentioned earlier that we were going to sort of cover some of the terms that we currently see and hear in the marketplace. So going back, and we'll touch a little bit on that, the term sustainability was first introduced in a United Nations report, and it was titled Our Common Future. And the term was meant to mean, and let me read it to you just so I don't get it wrong. It was intended, this is what it was meant: development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So that was what the term sustainability meant in the Brundtland report. This was about 30 years ago. And since that time, we have heard terms like, I'm familiar with the triple bottom line, people, planet, and profit. After the Enron scandal, terms like corporate social responsibility was prevalent in the marketplace. However, what I'm coming to see is that ESG, environment, social, and governance practices, what I'm coming to see is that this term is beginning to gain more definition and clarity. What I also committed to do was to give you some free resources and free tools that are currently out there, should you as a business owner choose to assess your own business's environmental, social, and governance goals. These are to be honest, there are more than thousands of different standards and frameworks out there. However, these are the ones that are used frequently. The first one is the GRI, Global Reporting Initiative. The Sustainability Accounting Standards Board has a tool. Another one is Task Force on Climate-Related Disclosures. The G7 have committed to follow this framework in their financial disclosures, so you might want to be familiar with that. And the next one that I'm seeing a lot of businesses use is the United Nations SDGs, the Sustainability Development Goals. I'm going to cover each of them in a little bit more detail. So the Global Reporting Initiative, this started after the Exxon Valdez oil spill. There was a group of socially conscious investors who got together and decided they needed some standards to help them assess environmentally a bit more. It was more than environment for them. It was just businesses that did good within their communities. This was again about 20 years ago. The Global Reporting Initiative has been in the marketplace for about 20 years. They are an independent standard setter. They are industry agnostic, so it's not specific to a certain industry. And the target audience for the reports that the GRI reports generate are for all stakeholders. So it is your employees, the communities that your business operates in, and yes, investors as well. And their approach to materiality is just any significant impact that your business has on the society, on the economy. And GRI focuses on human rights. They have a strong focus on human rights. The next standard that's out there that's frequently used is SASB, under the Value Reporting Foundation. Again, this is an independent standard setter. It's been in the marketplace for about 10 years. SASB is one of those free tools that is industry specific, which means that it will assess, IT company differently from a banking company. So they give you a different standard and identify different environmental and social issues that are specific to your industry. The target audience for SASB reports are providers of capital, and their approach to materiality is how does those issues impact the enterprise value of their business. So as I said, all of the issues that they identify would impact your business, the enterprise value of your business. So it has a financial material impact. The next one is the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. And as I mentioned, the G7 countries are using this framework. This is not a standard, it's a framework, and it is for climate-related financial disclosure. This framework is industry agnostic, and the reports that are generated by this framework is very specifically for the providers of capital. And their approach to materiality is again based on financial materiality, which is enterprise value creation. So those are some of the main frameworks. I did want to bring up the United Nations SDGs because I have seen a lot of businesses use this. They've got some very 17 goals, so far-reaching, very ambitious goals. But when you go on to their platform, they do break it down. There are 169 targets, and they give businesses a good measure good way and a good system to measure their initiatives against the SDGs. And I've brought it up because I do see that a lot of companies, even here in Calgary, using this. I'm going to go back again to SASB. And the reason I'm going back to SASB is because I think they have a great materiality finder tool. It's a free tool. This is a link to the tool. And what this tool will allow you to do is you can enter your business. So if you're a service provider, right? And I'm a service provider. What you can do is enter your sector and your specific, what's the right word that I'm thinking of? It specifically identifies the sector and the business that you're in, and it will help identify issues that would be material to your specific industry. So if you're a construction, you're in the construction business, it will help identify the issues under ESG that would financially materially impact your business. So I find this to be a great tool, which is why I wanted to highlight it for you. The global reporting, so if you choose not to use those tools or to go to those websites, the Global Reporting Initiative, and here it gives you a series of questions that you as a business owner, along with your senior partners, can go through. And as you go through those questions, the intention is that it would highlight the issues that are material or that would impact your business. So, you know, just a little cartoon here that goes, yep, it's the same ideas, but our job is to look at it with a fresh light, right? Because you're going to go through this series of questions and you're going to have the lens of ESG as you and your business partners are walking through those questions. So those are some of the free resources that are out there. While they're free, a lot of large companies and corporations are using those standards and those frameworks to report on their sustainability issues in the marketplace. And I'm going to talk about one more reason that you should care. I'd mentioned that I am currently working on a project where the company has been requested by their private investor to demonstrate their ESG issues. And if you're able to do that, what research has shown is that businesses that can identify their ESG issues, they experience a lower cost of capital, right? Because private investors recognize that if you're able to, you cannot manage what you haven't tracked. So if you don't understand issues that are going to impact your business and you're not tracking it and you're not managing it, then I think you're not seen as favorably in the eyes of lenders and investors. So I think I've approached this topic today as to why you should care very much from the perspective of, there's impending regulation that's coming down the road. In fact, in Europe, that regulation is already in place. And I've also approached it from the fact that it would be beneficial to you from a cost perspective, right? If you want to go out there and find lenders and investors for your business, it makes business sense for you to do so. But I think, I've been in the not-for-profit space for a very long time. And part of my interest and my passion for corporate social responsibility is because I know that business owners are people, and business owners as humans on this planet, we do want to ensure that we treat our employees well, that we are making, we are not having a harmful impact on the environment. And we do want to ensure that our businesses are run well. So from my perspective, the reason for sustainability and the reason for the growth in ESG and my passion as to why I want to support businesses that are interested in this is because, I do believe that we as humans can coexist and that we have the capacity to live on this Earth's biosphere. So that's part of my personal reason as to why I am supportive of this. I will end there. I've gone through quite a bit of stuff, and I was just curious to know what your experiences in sustainability, what your thoughts are, and if you had any questions of me.
So James, he had, he made a few comments, so I don't know if you want to share them with Pam.
Absolutely. Let me, actually, Marlene, if you could, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I don't know, like if James, if you want to just ask yourself and make the comments.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Perfect.
Yep, absolutely.
Hi, Pamela. I think we've met a couple of times. Jim Sterling. Pamela, I fielded a couple of questions your way. I actually was attending COP26, and there were an announcement made called the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero.
Right.
And I know there's further discussion going on about the Canadian government's pledges to reduce methane emissions further than industry had previously been working to. And so it seems that the E part of ESG gets continually more demanding for companies. So how do you look at the situation in Canada and how we're using ESG when these environmental constraints are growing ever more onerous?
That's a big question, Jim. That's a big question. I think that so answering it from my perspective, I think currently, right? I'm in Alberta, and I think as are all of us, and I'm familiar with a lot of what the oil and gas industry is doing, and I know that they have put in place a lot of measures that have resulted in reduced emissions. I think that's a story that we in Alberta could tell better. And I think what that means is that we do have the capacity to reduce emissions, and businesses are still operating. The oil and gas in all oil is currently at a pretty decent price. Businesses are still operating. And so to answer the question, I think we can do it, right? We can reduce emissions. We can stay afloat. We're going to need, that we can do it. I'm an optimist.
Yeah, no, it's good. Good answer. Thanks for your consideration of that question.
Did you have any other questions, Jim? Any other comments for the group?
I got lots of comments, but maybe not for this forum. But perhaps the comments I've put up onto the chat might allow others to have a look at what I'm looking at and consider their own companies or their own position on ESG. That would be sufficient for me.
Thank you. Sorry, I wasn't quite looking at the chat. Were there any comments, Marlene, that you think would be of use? Would be helpful, sorry, would be helpful?
Well, that was basically the comments that we had. So I don't know if anyone else wants to comment or has any question. It seems to be good. Brad, you want to share?
Sure. Well, actually, I'm working with a number of companies and delivering numerous workshops to industry organizations and groups within the energy sector. Because to me, this is a work in progress. 18 months ago, when I brought up the term ESG to business people I knew, I got blank stares. And you know, it's funny because I remember a couple months after I tell somebody, I'd run into them again and they'd go, I can't unhear what you told me. I can't get away from ESG now. I see it everywhere. So you know, how far we've progressed in the last 18 months, I think is quite significant. Right. And I find it interesting because when we talk about it, the guys who get the black eyes and don't look good on this tend to be the big companies. When I talk to small, medium companies about the values, you know, kind of the cultural aspects of living ESG responsibly as a business, I find a lot of small businesses live this. They do the right things. They care about their communities. They care about the environment. They care about sustainability. They want to leave a good legacy for their children, etc. They just don't promulgate it. They don't talk about it. They don't tell stories. They don't track and measure. And I think it's getting to the point now where we have to recognize that we need to kind of see the good that we're doing, see that we can do more and get better. But it's just, I think to a certain extent, I think it's hugely an issue of mindfulness
Right.
and being conscious. I call it ESG conscious businesses. So to me, conscious, it's a business really taking ownership and recognizing its responsibility consciously towards the environment, towards, and when I talk sustainability with the groups I talk with, to me, it's how do we get this and stop it being vague and general and make it really specific. So to me, when I talk about social responsibility, it's about the interactions with every one of your stakeholders every day, at every level, every conversation. You know, how are we interacting with all of our stakeholders, our employees, our suppliers, our customers? I mean, shareholders are just one stakeholder,
Right.
but they've been the ones kind of driving the dialogue to this date, and that has to change.
That is a good point. And I think another stakeholder group that is increasing as well, Brad, would be employees. There's a growing employee base. You know, I mentioned Google this year. The employees were the ones that drove the link between executive compensation to some of these other social issues. That was driven by employees. I don't know if anyone else sees that as well, that employees are kind of driving some of the conversations around perhaps some of the S pillar.
I think we're seeing it in spades right now with the great resignation, or whatever they're calling this trend right now.
Right.
Where I've found a lot of really supportive material is around kind of the thinking and the material around conscious capitalism, kind of John Mackey and Raj Sisodia's work in this area, because to me they describe the same values and behaviors to a lot of extent, but they've focused on, you know, how you do that cultural transformation, bring it into the organization, but it's still focusing on those same behaviors.
Right.
And in that research, they've got lots of great stuff, especially people under 40. ESG, this is their values.
Right.
And the energy industry right now is waking up to the fact that they can't hire people. We no longer have a petroleum engineering program at the University of Calgary, the heart of the industry, because no students want to take it.
Right. Yeah. Yep. And I think that is, you know, I didn't mention it in the presentation, but under the, you know, and I'm looking at it strictly from an investor perspective, but there is a growing demographic of younger investors who are more conscious about where they put their dollars. You know, the PRI signatories, BlackRock may represent them, I don't know, but there's a growing consciousness within younger investors that want to ensure that it is, like you said, Brad, an alignment of values. So I find that very optimistic and believe that things will, you know, I'm hopeful that things will change and are changing. I think what I've also recognized is that within Canada itself, there is different, Europe seems to be much further ahead in terms of ESG and the expectations that companies report on this. You know, that term double materiality, which was introduced by the EU 2019. So they're a little further ahead, but I do think that we're catching up here as well.
You can go ahead.
Hi there.
Hi,
Pam,
Ada.
thanks for that presentation. This is Ada.
Hi, Ada.
You know, just listening to what you were saying about the Google employees and things like that, and the awareness, not just at the senior management or investor level. I almost wonder, with more employees, almost, shall I say, negotiating a hybrid work environment and things like that, I almost wonder if there's an opportunity to even educate employees such that that is almost an expected value proposition to say, you know, if I do this part, this is also how we can support ESG. I don't know. What do you think about that as an option?
You know, that's a really, really good point, Ada. That's a really good point, Ada. Yeah, I think that employees do have that sense of, I am able to, you know, I have a voice in the say of how my business is going to be run. I believe that there was a survey done recently, the Trust Barometer, it's escaping me right now, but that survey showed that millennials and even Gen Z, which is the youngest workforce that's entered the employment sphere, they believe that they have the power and the capacity to influence the direction of their business, which is maybe something I did not have, and I'm not a millennial. So they do have that sense of, I can make a difference. Yeah, that's it. So that's a good point, you know, and if they were educated as to how, and this is what you can do, that would be, you know, I think beneficial for society at large. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. Thank you too.
So, well, Angie, she shared a link there. I don't know if Angie, if you want to share with us what the link is.
Sorry, that's just the link to the Trust Barometer that I think Pamela is referring to.
Oh,
Right, right. Thank you.
Yeah.
So did anyone else have any sort of thoughts and experiences that would be of value to the group?
Can I pipe up again? I dabble in ESG in terms of these frameworks that are suggested.
Right.
Although I would observe that in my own career, although ESG has not been spoken of, it's definitely been very much a part of the work process, just not named as such. So what I notice is, though, that there is a lot of greenwashing going on around ESG. And it's almost like the old tale of the emperors wearing no clothes.
Right.
And I'm like that little child standing in the audience looking at this parade and going like, that emperor has no clothes. And people are going like, shh, shut up, don't say that, you'll spoil the party.
Yep.
And fundamentally, I saw a Financial Times article that was at least 2 years old, which said, you pick your protocol and you'll find you get an answer, but none of the protocols actually correlate very well between ESG performance as measured versus company performance financially, which is really ultimately what investors want. They want to have an ESG process that allows them to pick winners such that they can feel more confident about investing. So until we get there, I kind of see ESG as still being a little bit of a, I would almost call it like a cottage industry.
Right. Right. No, you are absolutely right, Jim. There is a lot of greenwashing that is out there. And the ESG space is very gray right now. However, it is not unlike any standard that was set, right? And hence, you know, with the Financial Accounting Standards Board over 20 years ago, they did identify that they don't just want to hear good news stories. They do need to hear some of the disappointments as well, but not unlike accounting standards, right? Accounting standards have taken a long time to be in place. We tend to think of them as being set in stone, but they weren't. They weren't. You know, general accounting, you know, the gap, for example, it took time to be in place. So in the same way, these social issues and environmental issues and good governance issues, there may be just still in that growth phase, but there we can see ahead down the tunnel, and we can see that there is growing clarity and expectation around that. So that greenwashing will slowly end, maybe not in the next 5 years, but that will slowly end. But I think it's not unlike accounting principles. It took time for accounting principles to come into place. I mean, as recently as Enron, you could pick up financial statements in one country and they were kind of different in another country, right? As recently as Enron, and I'm old enough to remember that. So it's not unlike that in ESG. Brad, what are your thoughts?
Well, actually, it's interesting because I agree. At the end of the day, money only has a loyalty to money. And they didn't suddenly wake up last week and discover that ESG was their new set of values, as much as I'd love to believe that. This again is where I look to evidence is in the conscious capitalism area, there's a bunch of research out of Harvard, out of Ivy, out of a lot of the big business schools around conscious businesses. So not framed as ESG, but conscious businesses. And I can share with you a Harvard report that shows that businesses that live these kind of values actually outperform by as much as 9-to-1 their greed is good competitors. And if you look at Warren Buffett has always had a long view. And now you're in the investment circles, you're seeing a lot more investors wake up and go, maybe he was right all along, while everyone was focused on one Q out. Buffett always focused on long-term value creation. And the companies he picked tended to be better governance. They tended to be less responsive on quarterly and were doing more long-term. And you're seeing a big trend now in the financial communities around long-termism planning, long-term planning strategies, etc. And so money has kind of woken up and realized that over the longer term, companies that live and operate this way are actually outperforming. So I think the ESG kind of reinforces which are those kind of companies that have those different kind of values, because those are the ones we need to keep an eye on. So again, I think greed is still driving them. They're just kind of waking up and realizing that in the longer term, it's different. Because I actually, on the greenwashing thing, I just put up a report which the SEC issued, which is their first ever circular, challenging the veracity of ESG reporting. And BlackRock got spanked on that. And 2 months later, they put 2 environmentalists onto Exxon's board.
Right.
Which I think getting spanked for it probably was a big motivator.
Yeah.
So can I just respond to that? Because I think this is a really interesting conversation, perhaps maybe also a conversation for another time and place. But I do honestly think that there's a Canadian way that we can use in a discussion of ESG. And just as there are activities going on in the US, which is a much larger economy, there are activities here that are still relevant to Canada, which I think point to a way forward, which may be a little different perhaps in either Europe or the US, but which I think if we were as a small group of people interested in this stuff to narrow in on some of those real examples that are working, that could be a great place to know how we might proceed forward for greater success.
Thanks, Jim. So are you suggesting that there be more of a Canadian approach to ESG? I do believe that is what the Ontario Securities Exchange is looking at. They've started their
Canada's such a large country with such a small population, and at the end of the day, some of the big ESG issues reside right here in Alberta, not least within the oil and gas industry. So, you know, we could start here and we could have a very productive conversation, which would be a Canadian influencing conversation, because we have such an ESG challenge here. And I'm focusing here on issues of climate change and the response by the industry, the oil and gas industry, to that challenge. So I think we could do a lot here that could actually change Canada and could allow us all to prosper.
That's a good point.
And so I have one example which I'm really intrigued by. I don't know enough about the background to this company's performance and its abilities in this ESG space, which they don't call ESG, but it's very much that. And I'd just like to bring that to the table with a group that might be interested, and then see what other examples there are and try to create a sort of a template for making a greater progress on this area going forward. Maybe
So are you reaching out to the group, Jim, and just suggesting
Yeah.
if people are interested to connect with you?
maybe we could get Resource YYC to take a list of names and get us all connected to the extent that people in this call are interested in what I'm saying or what you're saying.
Of course.
Anyway, I have your email, Pamela, and I will connect with you, but I would prefer to connect with the wider group here of those that are interested in some of the things I'm saying and the points that you and Brad are also making. I'm feverishly typing on LinkedIn, trying to connect with a bunch of you guys.
Right. I'm sure that there would be a group that would be interested, and I think that if they are, they can connect with Marlene, and perhaps we could figure it out that way.
Yeah, we could maybe get Resource YYC to give us a room, and then if we're making progress, we can maybe use that room, and then everybody wins.
We will do. Brent,
Thank you for that, Jim.
I don't know if you have any question there.
Thank you. Great presentation and great discussion. No specific questions. I've been following and I guess liking in LinkedIn a number of posts on ESG for probably about a year, 18 months, I guess. As a Technology Alberta Board of Directors, I'm responsible for in 2022 advancing ESG for the 3,000 members, small and medium-sized members. And to Brad's point, they often don't talk about it. They don't celebrate it. They're not sure what it means. So we're trying to put it into bite-sized pieces for them. So I appreciate the tidbits of information. I know the banks have signed on in Canada to Mark Carney's, from the investor's point of view. I think one of the concerns from an investor's point of view from that angle is, so I'm investing in a brewery and they're doing great renewable energy, but some people say, but that's not socially responsible, right? Because it's liquor. So I think that's going to be some of the nuance that starts to go out there with regards to, you've got environment, you've got social, and you've got governance. What does it mean as you cross different cohorts and different communities? So lots still to learn, and I appreciate the information.
Great. Thank you, Brent.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. I think it is a very evolving space. You know, there's still a lot that we are, and I get the feeling just from chatting with my colleagues that it is a little newer here in Alberta as well. Could be wrong there, but that's the sense that I get. So it is, there's a lot more good conversations that could be had around this topic for sure. I am conscious of time, Marlene.
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much, Pam and everyone else for joining us today. And I want to encourage you to check out our website. We have more events coming up, and I'm pretty sure you guys are going to love it. Thank you so much again, and we will see you again soon, I hope. Thank you so
everyone.
much, and have a great day. Thank you
Thank
again,
you.
Pam.
Thanks for your comments.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Pam. Nice to see you again.
Good to see you, Ada.
Thank you.
Sure. Bye.